they found, to their puzzlement, that it seemed the entire population, Europeans, descended from only 7 female ancestors. It was all about Toba, which used to be an island in Indonesia. It's now it's the biggest volcanic eruption since hominoids roamed the earth. The problem is, if we look at Egyptian artifacts, there are many items which just don't make sense. It's becoming clearer that humanity had long looked to the sky. It shows that humanity had evolved a culture which was shared, again for a long time, but that culture was shared over a very wide area, at least of the Mediterranean. It seems something with incredible intelligence designed the universe in which we live, and set the laws of physics which determined how everything we see around us evolved out of the primordial soup, or to put it more accurately, the initial bath of radiation.
Hello everybody, we are here with Glyn Thomas today. He's an author, and we're gonna get to know him a little bit better. Can you tell us about yourself?
Right. Yes, my name is Glyn Thomas. I'm a retiree, and in retirement I've been able to wallow in voluminous research on many different subjects. It's led me to identify many interesting things, and I concluded that it would be helpful if, together with my friend Miguel, we produce a series of YouTubes, which will also be available as podcasts, that address many of the issues, or touch on many of the issues that have arisen during the course of my research, and mostly are reflected in a series of books that I've written that are available both in print and as ebooks from all leading bookstores and online book resellers. So we're going to start just by talking a little bit about why I wrote and what I'm trying to achieve, and why I think it may be helpful for humanity.
What made you write this book, considering there's already a lot of sources of information about these issues?
That's a very good question. I'm trying to address, I think, some fairly fundamental issues for us, for mankind. Who we are, where we came from, how we're going to develop, what happens to us when we're not in a body. Do we exist in a non-incarnate phase? How reliable are our religious beliefs? There are many aspects which examined and reveal some amazing, interesting underlying facts. The main reason that I wrote was that whilst I was coming across amazing detailed information, it seemed to me that most experts in the fields that I'm interested in are very focused on their own expertise. They've got very deep knowledge, but it's very narrow. Sometimes even within a subject it's narrow, because they really focus on the depth. And I have found that by looking in different disciplines, you can discover facts that corroborate and support an idea that may sound extraordinary. And alternatively, you may come across other information that undermines it and shows that actually it's a nice idea, it sounded good, but it just doesn't fit the facts. And I think what I've tried to do is the opposite of the narrow chimney. So I look across a broad range of disciplines, from atomic physics, cosmology, terraforming, climatology, volcanology, geology, archaeology, and the newer science of astroarchaeology, plus of course history. And give one example of how this kind of approach leads to new information. You'll be aware that female mitochondria is the way we can detect the relationship that any two people may have. It's something which effectively clicks for each generation. So if we did a DNA analysis of us, Miguel and I, we could find out how many generations in the past we may well have had a common maternal ancestor. Somebody was doing a lot of research on a very large sample of Caucasian DNA, and they found, to their puzzlement, that it seemed the entire population, Europeans, descended from only 7 female ancestors. And this constriction in the population appeared to have occurred around 74,000 years ago. The researcher couldn't find a reason, it didn't seem to make sense. And he was in the process of giving a lecture tour across North America. Turned up in one university one evening, having a meal in the refectory, and saw this poster for an interesting looking lecture. So he went to it. The lecture was about megavolcanoes. It was all about Toba, which used to be an island in Indonesia. It's now it's the biggest volcanic eruption since hominoids roamed the earth. Wow. It happened 74,000 years ago. One measure of its scale is they estimate the ejecta that came out of the volcano at 13,000 cubic kilometers. Now, so what? If you compare that with, say, Vesuvius, that was 3 cubic kilometers. This was 13,000. Ergo, we had years of nuclear winter, which means there's no sunlight, which means vegetation doesn't grow, which means all animals, most animals, including humans, starve. So there would have been a real population crunch globally. So that's a good example of where looking at different disciplines outside your own narrow field can reveal something that really supports that argument.
So we're quite lucky to be here today. It was really close to extinction.
Yeah.
Really
and
close.
it's not the first time, and it won't be the last, unfortunately.
Yeah. The title of your book says Atlantis. What about that?
Yes, I've done quite a lot of work on the events which triggered climate change, massive climate change, around 10 to 15,000 years ago. One of these, which we have a lot of information about, appears to explain what happened at the end of a series of climate events that are called the Dryas periods. These closed with another major event around 9,620 BC. And indeed, it seems that the events that occurred are memorialized in the story, myth, opinions differ, of Atlantis. And that's one of the things we'll touch on in a later episode.
So what kind of challenges have you had with the conventional history?
Interesting question. So far, I have not personally experienced problems. This may be because I'm yet to become that popular or that well known.
Right.
But I am aware that others who are popular, who do write in this space, and some of whom I think do contribute a lot to the sum of human knowledge, they have some quite bitter experiences where they've found that some new discovery or new theory is the way it's handled by the media, who tend to respond by seeking opinions from the known experts in the field. Mm-hmm. That in itself is very understandable. Where I think there is an outturn which is not very good is that the people they turn to tend to be the senior professors of their subject in a leading university. So far, so good. But what is overlooked is these guys generally tenured, achieved their tenure because of a very good thesis that they wrote when they were much younger. Mm-hmm. And they're now presented with what they would originally have seen as a crazy idea, which would also undermine the basis, their credibility.
Yeah.
So they're naturally defensive. So their response is, oh, it's misunderstood, it's misclassified, it's rubbish. And that, I think, is quite unfortunate for humanity. However, on the brighter side, in certain fields, the situation is beginning to change. A good example of this is Egyptian antiquities. There's a huge body of artifacts, a huge body of research, a lot of knowledge, and historically, archaeologists have been in charge. Their technique is to carefully extract an object from layers of dirt or whatever, dust it off. They look for any writing on it, which helps pinpoint when they think it was made and who by. Where it lies can give you a feel as to what it was used for, the time it was used, the culture in which it was used. And a body of evidence is built up, or has been built up, painfully over many eons. The problem is, if we look at Egyptian artifacts, there are many items which just don't make sense given the existing explanations. Recently, we've had more technical people looking at these, engineers, stonemasons. With their knowledge, when they look at the surface characteristics, the incredibly precise internal cuts and stoneworking, they conclude that the objects being examined cannot possibly have been made with the tools that we ascribe the ancient Egyptians as having. Talking about the dynastic period of the pharaohs from around 3400 BC, first pharaoh of the first dynasty, up to Cleopatra, 50 BC. During most of that period, the basic tools were bronze, at least up to about 1100 BC. So for most of the formative period of the dynastic pharaohs, they used copper tools, chisels, and stone hammers. And the surface quality produced just does not fit. Engineers have opined that some polished stone surfaces are smoother than plate glass. Quite how the Egyptians would have measured that and concluded, okay, it's now better than plate glass, so we can stop polishing, I don't know. Also, the reflectiveness of polished surfaces. A lot of the sculptures of gigantic sculptures of heads of pharaohs reflect light, and in tricky parts of the image. So eyelids, fingernails, tightly curved surfaces are still highly reflective of light, despite the fact that Pharaoh was supposed to have lived 4,000 years ago or more. If we compare that with current technology, we find it difficult to produce something that will be reflective for 50 years. So I think we'll get into the detail in a later episode, but fundamentally there's something wrong. Either the Egyptians had far better tools than we credit them with, or these artifacts must have been a legacy from a much earlier culture that has, apart from these items, completely disappeared. In fact, we'll come to one article which visually is absolutely stunning and will take everyone's breath away. Well documented article. We'll leave that for another episode. We're just trying to give you an initial flavour of the kinds of things we'll be looking at.
Which civilization left that legacy for the Egyptians?
We only have the indirect evidence, various articles which appear to have been reused by later Egyptian culture, but that if in the absence of some relatively advanced tooling, these must have come from an earlier culture. Going back, it would seem that violent climatic effects, which were extinction level events, certainly continental if not global, pretty much destroyed those civilizations. Changes in sea level. We know sea levels have risen 100, 130 meters in the past 20,000 years. So most civilizations have a concentration of their urban areas, etc., close to sea level. 130 meters would take out a lot of it. So it may be under the sea, covered in sediment. Some artifacts may be ones which were retained, they were hidden, or they were found and reused, and they give us an inkling of the capabilities of an earlier culture. The epicenter would appear to be around the Mediterranean, because that's where we've found some very interesting things. We're discovering new cities, particularly in Anatolia in Turkey, which date back as far as 12,000 BC, which is about double the earlier estimates of when mankind started farming. Basically, you can't have a city without farming, because you've got to have a lot of people that are not involved in farming. So you need to have excess food production to enable other people to do other things.
What kind of city, what kind of buildings?
What we have is about half a dozen places that have been found in Turkey. Maybe mainly on the eastern side, central and eastern Turkey. And these look like hilltop fort positions with a strong religious context. I think they believe there's about at least 8,000 buildings.
Wow.
Some will be civic buildings, some will be production buildings of some kind of storage, but that's still an awful lot of families. So that's quite a sizable community.
Wow. So was there anything left there that would indicate they have some belief systems, like a religion or some idea of God?
The Turkish discovery, it's becoming clearer that humanity had long looked to the sky. These days, people have various media that entertain them, newspapers, television, internet, etc. But if you go back even 200 years, virtually none of that existed. 200 years ago, everybody knew the main constellations in the sky because they saw it every night. The glory of the heavens was something everyone perceived, everybody understood. Now, an interesting aspect of it, nowadays we're barely aware of the sky being divided into 12 constellations, the signs of the zodiac. But the amazing thing is how far back that goes. Until quite recently, we were confident it went back to Sumer, the Sumerian civilization, which we thought started around 4,000 BC, and it collapsed, we think, due to climate change, actually, around 2000 BC. Now we're finding the same symbols were used by the people who lived in Turkey. So the knowledge has been sustained over that incredible period, 12,000 BC up to today. Not only, obviously people always looked at the sky if they didn't have any artificial light or entertainment, but it's the fact that the sky was divided into 12 segments, and the names and the symbols given to those segments has been a very, very strong feature. Just opening up one tiny thing that we'll come back to in future episodes. People are familiar with the idea of precession. There was a musical about 20 years ago called Hair, maybe more than 20 years ago, and one of the famous songs from that is The Dawning of the Age of Aquarius, because this is the beginning of the Age of Aquarius. Now, precession just means that viewed from Earth, we actually go backwards through the zodiac. So whilst we're entering Aquarius, we're leaving Pisces. And many people will recognize the fact that the early Christians used a symbol of a fish, Pisces, because for them it was the dawning of a new age. So they used the symbol for the age. Before Pisces was Aries, the ram. So what's the son of God? The lamb.
The lamb.
Go back another 2,000 years, especially 2,160, each zodiacal sign. So you go back before Aries, you've got Taurus. So you go back 2,000 years before Jesus, you've got Abraham, and you've got the people wandering around Sinai. What did they do? They worshipped the Son of God, which was the golden calf. This is a glimpse into the importance that the zodiacal signs and periods were quite dominant in people's lives. They affected people hugely. Foundational aspect of life and belief systems. So, to answer your question, yes. And the key is that people looked to the sky. At least it shows that humanity had evolved a culture which was shared, again for a long time, but that culture was shared over a very wide area, at least of the Mediterranean. And funnily enough, when Pizarro and his followers from Spain got across Panama and went down to Peru, they found that Incas were using very similar signs. How did they know? Why did they divide the sky into 12 parts? It's amazing. It points to there being some, trade or migration or something going on.
So why do you think history is so important for us, for humanity?
I think it's sad, first of all, that history is becoming downgraded as an academic subject. Many countries and many schools within those countries have almost given up teaching history or politicized it.
Yeah.
To me, it's important to understand who we are, where we've come from, and what our potential is. We can learn a lot from the past. We can, with the discoveries that are now being made, I think we need to update our belief systems, because a lot of them were rooted in a time when our knowledge was far more limited. There's a common idea that God created man. Nowadays we have tools that enable us to do things that we thought previously could only be done by God. Last month, fortunately, a very credible medical institution, the Wellcome Trust, announced that it was going to build a human being. They're going to do this by building, molecule by molecule, the 23 chromosome pairs that drive a human DNA. Once they've done that, they'll effectively create a complete human being.
Wow.
That sounds a pretty crazy thing. And if we can do that, are we God? Or is God still somewhat smarter than us?
Yeah.
It raises some serious questions. It is very interesting to look at the deities that were worshipped by the different Middle Eastern cultures, because we will find actually that it was one large family rather than different gods in each culture, which endured for many millennia. Really quite surprising. One thing before we close this session, a common feature of most cultures, including today, is the idea that God created man. Now, in a very indirect way, I can agree with that. But the methodology, I think, is very different to how the conventional understanding is. We'll come on in the next session to look at how it seems something with incredible intelligence designed the universe in which we live and set the laws of physics which determined how everything we see around us evolved out of the primordial soup, or to put it more accurately, the initial bath of radiation. So with that, thank you, Miguel.
Thank you so much.
See us in the next episode.